I'll start with Dr. Mason. Dr. Mason, please.
Well, thank you so much for your welcome. Use this one?
Either one, they're both on.
All right, I'll just use this. It's a pleasure to be with you, and each time I've had opportunity to get to know some of you who are affiliated with the Dallas Islamic Center, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for your spirit, for your convictions, and for your dedication to this kind of dialogue. And it is in itself an act of peacemaking. As I have come to know you, and many of your colleagues and friends in the community, I've been impressed by the dedication to the common good that you have. And by the fact that it is inspired by your religious convictions. It is not about dampening your religious convictions for the sake of others, but by expressing your religious convictions with an openness to other people. And that is an impressive way to go about for each of us in our own way. I want to say thank you for the privilege of being with Mark Chancey as well, and I look forward to Mr. Ansari when he is able to come. As I thought about the subject that you gave us, it was important for me to go back and also set this in some context. I think many of those of you who are here, especially some of those of you in my congregation, Wilshire Baptist, probably would not know perhaps of the challenge of the Dallas Islamic Center and the approach that those who, let me say, from the Gulen movement and its way of trying to advocate in public life for peacemaking, what they try to do. And so I'd like, if I may, for a moment, to set this in some historical context and help you understand who it is that's sponsoring this and how it is we've come to this conversation. All of us try to figure out a way in our societies, whether here in the United States or in places that some of us have come from, England, Europe, and the like, to navigate this path of how to live together, of whether of how culture is to develop. And as Dr. Hunt has said through Dr. McLemore, one of the ways that we're always tempted to do this is through trying to enforce our own vision of society on everyone else. This was, of course, even the most noble attempt in Turkey in the early part of the 20th century with Kemal Atatürk, and the attempt to secularize a country for the sake of democracy. Nonetheless, over time, this became an imposed approach that limited free expression of religious practice in public places. On the other side of that was, of course, the Islamists who wanted to impose a kind of religious practice in public places, whether headscarves or the like. And so the question is there a third way? Is there a way between these where without violence, without coercion, without insistence that everyone live as everyone else, that there's a way for religious people with religious convictions and those without to be able to participate peaceably in a society? And this is the third way, you might say, as I understand the Gulen movement is seeking to advocate. That is to build a society in which people can flourish together side by side, those with strong religious convictions and those with less, and they're equally citizens, and they are promoting peace and the common good. Foundational to this is Hizmet. That is the notion of service and the conviction that people sacrifice for the sake of the common good and not only their own well-being, and that there is a special relationship that exists among people of the book, that is Jews, Christians, and Muslims. And so here we are, two of us being Christians, and we thank you for welcoming us in this way. Baptist is my tradition of Christian. And it is interesting that, to me at least, that we have had our own take on this third way, you might say. We began with a group called the Anabaptists. That is, those who baptized again, they rebaptized people. in the 16th century, in Europe, everyone was pretty much Catholic up until that moment, or Orthodox Eastern. And so you would be baptized into the church as an infant, whether you wanted to be or not. This is simply, you were born into this country, into this church, into this family, and your identity was shaped in you without regard to your own personal conviction. Anabaptists were those who said that religion must always be a matter of one's personal conviction. It must never be forced upon someone else. It has to be a matter of one's own heart and decision. And so the Anabaptists said that you must not be baptized or make your decision about faith until you are old enough and able enough to make your own choice. And their church tradition then led to the modern Baptist movement that started in England about a century later and has come to the United States eventually, and it is part of my tradition. That is, all religion is fundamentally voluntary in its way. That no one can force someone else to believe something against one's conscience. And this led, in America, to an extraordinary event in the history of government. And that is, Baptists joined with others of goodwill who were more secular in their understanding of things to promote what came to be known as the First Amendment of the Constitution. Prior to constitutional America, religion was always about what communities or states or countries said would be the religion of everyone, and to have a different view of that, you had to dissent. You had to choose not to be part of the majority, and this would make it difficult for you to practice your religion freely. Baptists believe that everyone should be free to choose to practice whatever religion they wish without the country, the state, the king, or anyone determining for them that they should or they could practice their faith. So we believe that there was a kind of third way. And the religious liberty that we advocated since the early times in our country is just this. In fact, let me read to you the comment of John Leland, one of our forebears from Virginia. Here's what he said. "The notion of a Christian commonwealth should be exploded forever. Government should protect every man in thinking and speaking freely and see that one does not abuse another. The liberty I contend for is more than toleration. The very idea of toleration is despicable. It supposes that some have a preeminence above the rest to grant indulgence, whereas all should be equally free. Jews, Turks, pagans, and Christians." This he said in the early 1700s. Isn't that interesting? So he wanted, in that time, everyone to be on equal footing in the United States of America. And that came to be the idea of the First Amendment guaranteeing religious liberty to everyone in America. Now, Baptists have stood for that since the very beginning, because we believe that religion should never use force, but should be an instrument in peacemaking in order to create communities of well-being where every person is responsible to God directly, or to practice their own religion without deference to some other person. On the positive side, though, it's not just about prohibiting people from harming one another, it's also creating relationships of peace. And to do that, one had to go beyond one's own religious convictions to create institutions that would promote that. So across time, we have, as Baptists, believed in starting these kinds of institutions. Schools are one of those things. great universities in America, many Baptists helped to start these great universities, including universities like Brown University. And the University of Chicago was also Baptist originally, if you can believe it. And it was mainly funded, that school, by the oil magnate John D. Rockefeller, who was a Baptist, did you know? Right. Rockefeller was concerned that benevolence was not well thought out, and so he decided that he would focus his benevolence work on educational institutions. And here's what he said about the University of Chicago. He said he wanted to finance institutions whose research would have a pervasive influence, following the principle of trying to abolish evils by destroying them at the source. We felt that to aid colleges and universities whose graduates would spread their culture far and wide was the surest way to fight ignorance and promote the growth of useful knowledge. Rockefeller said that you need to delve into the causes of human misery. That has been our guiding principle, to benefit as many as possible. Instead of just giving alms to beggars, if anything can be done to remove the causes which lead to the existence of beggars, then something deeper and broader and more worthwhile will have been accomplished. Now, that sounds an awful lot like attempts to get to the root of how you fight fanaticism. Because when poverty and ignorance exist, there is plenty of opportunity for fanaticism to come about. Baptists have continued to do that, and in Texas, though we're in a Methodist institution right now, I would say that you should know that there are many colleges and universities in Texas funded by Baptists and founded by them. Hospitals. Do you know that the Baylor Hospital here in Dallas, the founding vision for Baylor Hospital came from the pastor of the First Baptist Church of Dallas, Texas, George W. Truett. It's another day, Mark, today. But in 1903, he said this: "Is it not now the time to begin the erection of a great humanitarian hospital, one to which men of all creeds and those of none may come with equal confidence?" That hospital has flourished. The first person to come forward to give a gift to it was $200,000. His name was Colonel Christopher Columbus Slaughter, and he was a Baptist cattleman, believe it or not. Slaughter, yeah, exactly. Children's homes and orphanages have been a big part of this, and there are several people in the audience today who work for Buckner Children's Homes and Benevolences, and you should know that Father Buckner led in championing the cause of the poor and the vulnerable for many years. One historian said that he was a man of incessant activity. He began a variety of campaigns for social justice, among which were care for the elderly, improved race relations, prison reform, rehabilitative programs for juvenile offenders, better education for the poor, shelters for abused women, and an epilepsy treatment center. These are efforts by Baptists to move beyond their own congregations, to join together to create mediating institutions of society in our civic context that would create peacemaking and well-being, and in doing so, I think, has stemmed the tide of fanaticism tremendously and created some good opportunity and models for us. I salute those of you in the Muslim community who are engaged in this kind of educational and benevolence work, and believe that we are partners in it, and I thank you for the privilege of being with you today.